Okay, here's a Ducati 2013 HyperMotard 821. We're going to be doing an oil change, oil filter, and oil plug. This is what I used. This is the K&N 153. Also used a 14 hex 14. That was for the screen washer, and there's a 3/8 to 1/2 inch driver because I have different size tools. And I also used the Mode Tool 7100. All this is at the very end. Put down the cloth, make sure there's no oil dripping, protect the pavers. I'm going to use an oil pan. This bike takes 3.3 liters, and again I use 7100 4T 15W 50. Has two bolts directly on the bottom of the oil pan. One is a hex 5, and the other one is a hex 6. The hex 5 is the magnetic bolt closer to the shifter, and the hex 6 uses an aluminum washer, and that's right under the. It's right next to the oil filter, and it's right under the screen, the mesh screen that's in there. The hex 5 is a little small, so I put some blue tape on it and I cracked it free. It was kind of hard, but you don't want it to spin and round out that hex 5. That hex 5, you got to put something on it. Some people say dip it in sand or make it, put something in there. I wrapped blue tape around it. You can see in that picture. There's the bolt with the shavings on there. This didn't work. I tried to clean it with a rag, didn't work. I had to use an air gun. Now I'm doing the hex 6, and I'm taking that out. That has an aluminum washer, and I'm taking that out, and that is not magnetic, and it didn't have any shavings on it. But what I'm going to do now that I have both the hex 5 and the hex 6 bolts taken out of the bottom, I'm going to work on the oil filter, take that out as well. I ran the bike, let it warm up for a little while. There's the hex 6 with the aluminum washer on there. And that's the hex 5. That goes near the shifter. To get this off, I just used a oil filter wrench that I have. And remember, the bike was warmed up for like 5 to 10 minutes, so the oil's a little hot, so I was careful with it. Let that drain. I probably let the bike drain for around 30 minutes. So during that time, I was cleaning some of the bolts and getting it ready for the next step. You can see there the bolt right below the oil window is a hex 14, and there's a metal screen in there that's also held in by a hex 14. So then I'm using my 3/8 to 1/2 inch adapter, and I'm using my hex 14 and I did crack it earlier. It's not that easy to unbolt. I did have to put some strain on it to take it off, and I did get it off pretty easy. The hex 14 fits perfectly. The hex 6 fits perfectly, but the hex 5 with the magnetic bolt, that you have to be careful not to round out. That hex 14 comes with a 32 by 38 by 1.5 gasket or socket, whatever you want to call it. I did try to get the screen out. I could not get it out, so I used a big wrench I have to break it out, and then I use the smaller wrench to get the screen out. It also uses the hex 14 to get it out. So you'll see me pulling this screen out with a hex 14. And there you go. You can see there's some shavings and stuff. Even though I had the first service done on this bike, I don't think they took it out and cleaned it at the dealership, and that's why I'm doing my own oil change. But yeah, you can see a lot of shavings and stuff and junk in there, more than I expected. I tilted the bike back and forth to get all the oil out. Now that all the orifices are open, you have the Hex 14, the Hex 6, and the Hex 5. That Hex 5, you got to put something around that your hex screw, your hex tool, so it doesn't round out in there. Be very careful when you're breaking that free. Wrap some tape around it. I used blue tape and wrapped it around it, and then I broke it free. But moving the bike around definitely helped get some extra oil out. You can see on the other side, I also put a 2x4 little piece of wood underneath the kickstand because I don't have a center stand. So I put the little piece of wood to keep the bike more level so it will drain more evenly. But I still move the bike left and right to get all the oil out. Next steps, I'm going to be putting on the K&N oil filter. That's a KN153. I take some of the used oil, and even though it was lubricated around the seal, I just used a little bit extra. Tip of my finger, wrapped it around, make sure it has enough oil. And then I did put that on hand tight, and I did tighten it to 11 Newton meters, which seemed to be good. I did use the nut on the end of the K&N filter to tighten it to 11 Newton meters, 8 foot-pounds. I know a lot of people do not recommend that, and hand tight is fine. I was careful not to put a lot of pressure on that. Oil filters do not need to be super, super, super tight. So don't over tighten it. You can rip that nut right off. Here is the Hex 6. It came with an aluminum washer. I reused it. I couldn't find one online of what size to use, but you can see that it's 15.1 by 19, and it's 1.5. Actually, it's really by 1. It's 15.1 by 19 by 1. But I reused it. Not an issue. It was in good shape. But again, it's a 15.1 by 19 by 1. And you can torque that one to 25 Newton meters or 18 foot-pounds. And there was no leaking at all. So that's what I ended up doing. And again, that's the Hex 6. I just cleaned it up. I don't believe mine was magnetic. But on the other side by the shifter, there is a magnetic bolt. So you don't need to worry about it. So I cleaned it. I did put some anti-seize on there just for next time. Very little. I just don't want to have an issue of getting it off next time. Sometimes they're very difficult. I put the Hex 6 in there, and I tightened it, like I said, to 18 foot-pounds. That's 25 Newton meters. Make sure you don't cross-thread it. Take your time and set it up straight. It was a little tight going in the entire time, so I was very careful not to strip it. Just make sure you don't strip it, and make sure you clean any debris around the area. The next bolt I'm going to be working on is the Hex 5. That's the one by the shifter. And that's the magnetic one. I used an air hose to clean that as well, to get all the shavings off. Don't use a rag, just use an air hose if you have one. If you don't, I guess just be careful trying to get all the shavings off without them going into your hand. The little shavings can cause pretty bad splinters. Here I am in the video. I'm tightening the Hex 6. That's what I'm doing right now, so won't jump around yet. And like I said, 18 foot-pounds. Or 25 Newton meters. I was trying to use some carb and choke cleaner to initially clean the screen. It was a mess, didn't work well. The filings are so fine, and some of them were big, but most of the filings were so small I couldn't do it. So I used an air compressed hose out in the grass, got all the filings off. And I also use the air compressed hose on the magnetic washer as well. I did put anti-seize on that, very little. And I got these copper washers in a kit. They're 12 by 18 by 1.5. That's the exact size. So if you buy those online, just look for 12 by 18 by 1.5 millimeter. And those work perfect and match up to the original. Here I'm showing the old one and the new one. They're perfect. That's 12, so it's really 12.1 inner and 18 on the outside. But if you order a 12 by 18 by 1.5, that's the dimensions you'll get. Now I'm using the Hex 5 and a little more blue tape on there. You don't want to round it out. I don't love that bolt, but I'm going to use it for the next couple of oil changes, and I probably will switch it out. I'm hand tightening the Hex 5 magnetic bolt, and then I'm going to tighten it to 14 foot-pounds or 20 Newton meters. And here I show I'm just putting some blue tape. I want to make the Hex 5 a little bit bigger so it doesn't spin so much. It didn't work that well, but it did work when I broke it. When I unscrewed it, it worked really well. Just be careful not to, if you feel it rounding out, just stop and try to add some thickness to that Hex 5. So now that I have the two bottom bolts in, the Hex 5 and the Hex 6, I'm cleaning the air filter one more time. Do not use any kind of anti-seize or anything in that. That's going right into the oil flow, right into the motor. I did tighten that screen to 10 Newton meters, which is about 7 foot-pounds. That's the internal mesh torque. I've seen different things online saying 42 Newton meters, which is 30 foot-pounds. I made it tight, and I think the 10 Newton meters and the 7 foot-pounds is going to be plenty. Yeah, I initially made it too tight, I believe. I think I went to like 30 foot-pounds, and I said I just didn't like how tight it was for the next oil change, so I loosened it. I got a more precise torque wrench, and I set it for 10 Newton meters, which is 7 foot-pounds. I just felt like the first torque wrench was not accurate. It's one of my cheaper ones. So here I am with a better torque wrench, something more accurate, and I set it to 10 foot-pounds. I mean 10 Newton meters, 7 foot-pounds, and it felt pretty snug. Now I'm going to put the H14 with the gasket, the 32 by 38 by 1.5 gasket. I reused the gasket. I put some anti-seize on it. Could not find that gasket anywhere, so I'm reusing the aluminum one. They do sell them on eBay and some other areas, but the seller sent me the wrong size, so it's a 32 by 38 by 1.5. I reused the original, and no leaking at all, so it's really up to you, your preference. And that one I tightened to 42 Newton meters or 30 foot-pounds. And there it is, 42 Newton meters. So now I have all the orifices plugged up. I have the oil filter in, I have the mesh screen in, and I have the two plugs in the bottom in, and everything was cleaned. So now I'm going to start adding oil. This bike takes 3.3 liters, and all said and done, it probably took 3.2. It took quite a bit, so that means I drained the bike really well by warming it up ahead of time. I marked clearly so I can see as I'm filling, because I'm using at the 3, once I hit 3 liters, I'm going to slow down. So I end up filling this up and checking. Again, the bike is not centered. It's on the 2x4, to make it more centered and level, but not as center as it would be on a bike stand. So keep that in mind. So right when I got to the 3 liters, I then manually take the bike, make it level just to see where it sits in the oil indicating window. Take your time, make sure you don't overfill it. So I'm checking about every liter or so I'm going down. And remember, the bike is still not level, so you're not going to see it until I now hold the bike level. You can see how high the oil is. It's not above the indicator line, but it is high. I'm going to add a little bit more because I don't like, you can see it's almost half full. Some people put oil in the oil filter before they put it on because they don't want it to have that dry 2 milliseconds it's going to be dry without oil. So some people fill the oil filter with oil, and if I remembered, I probably would have done the same. But right now it's showing at the high mark when the bike is level. So I'm going to probably kick it over and let it run for about 10 seconds. So now I'm going to add a little bit more oil. And now I'm adding oil, keeping it, remember, the bike level. Do not keep it on the kickstand while you're filling it, otherwise you will overfill it. And it's almost getting to the 3.2, 3.3 liter mark of oil being used. I probably used 3.1 to 3.2. And here's a close shot of the oil indicating window showing it's at the high mark. And when it's running, goes down to the low. I play around with the levelness of the bike just to make sure I like how the oil is. Really taking my time. Everything worked out well. I will check the oil after a few more rides to make sure if I have to add a little bit more. But I liked how everything turned out. No leaks at all. Took the bike down the street, ran really well. And at the end, you'll see the credits that tell you about the torque settings and what tools you'll need for this oil change. Hope you enjoyed it. Like, subscribe. Thanks, guys.